Welcome back to The Good Business Witch. I am your host, Megan Winkler, and today we are struggling with Mercury retrograde, just a smidgen here. If you're listening to this kind of in situ here in the beginning of August, we are on the doorsteps of Mercury retrograde. So we're still in the shadow period, but oh my goodness gracious. It is already driving me nuts. So if you have had technical difficulties, issues with vehicles and or transportation, or just like communication issues, like, oh my God, how did I get into a fight over something so little? We'll go with the Mercury retrograde. Which means that this week's episode is actually pretty well timed. This week, I am talking about boundaries and balance, and we're going to be talking about protecting your energy, especially as a neurodivergent business owner. But I also want to include highly sensitive people in that, and also those of us who have energy limiting disorders or challenges. I am highly sensitive. I am neurospicy, neurodivergent, and I do have an energy limiting disorder or two. One we know for sure. So all of these tips and tricks and rules and all that apply to all three categories of individuals there. So for me, I have both a highly sensitive energy and aura and all of that. But I also have energy limiting conditions. So I actually have hypothyroidism. So my thyroid, I take supplements every day to help keep it functioning and keep those levels correct in my body. I also have hypermobility, and it's likely that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because that is genetic and my kid has it. And I know he'd be okay with me sharing that. And so, so that is kind of it's a connective tissue disorder. But one of the things it does is it does kind of wear you out. Like your body is kind of working against itself sometimes. And so it can be really limiting in your energy. Right. And definitely like having a thyroid issue, having a slow, sluggish thyroid, this little butterfly shaped gland right in the base of your neck can just, I don't know, control your entire life. So for me, it is super important that I manage my energy properly based on what I need. And so this is one of the big things that I love helping my clients with, is really understanding what their energy needs are, what productivity looks like for them, and how they can use like their hyper focus moments, or when they can use their pursuit of novelty, or whatever neurodivergent quality comes out for them, like how they can use that to their benefit. Because I really, really am always trying to work toward people's strengths, right? And we all have challenges. And so we really just kind of have to learn how to work with those, right? So a few words I'm going to be using throughout. One is neurodiversity. And so this is anyone who kind of thinks outside of what traditional medicine and traditional psychology deem as quote unquote normal. So some individuals that are considered neurodivergent are those with dyslexia, those with ADHD or are on the autism spectrum. Those who have social anxiety are also on there. And there's a few others. It's kind of a decent sized list, like Tourette syndrome is one of them as well. So if you have just kind of a different way of operating in the world, a different way of processing information, if you do the thing that I like to call buffering, where it's just kind of like you have that delay in like receiving information and then there's a process, you're a little neurospicy, and it's cool. Welcome. I like the word neurospicy because it feels a little more fun. It also gets past the evil algorithms. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist or a therapist. So for me, saying, we're neurospicy is a little less of a technical term, but you get the essence, right? Energy management is another term I'm going to be using. And so when we talk about energy management, I don't like to talk about time management, right? Because time management feels very rigid. It feels very much like we're looking at the clock all the time. However, energy management is really tuning into our bodies and tuning into the energies around us to say, hey, how is this affecting me? For instance, Mercury retrograde, right? But also, there's been some big shifts in politics over the past couple of weeks, right? Where Kamala Harris is coming forward as the presumptive Democrat nominee for president. And I was talking with my family recently, and I said, this feels so good to want to be for something. A lot of us, and I imagine if you're listening, you agree with me. If you're not, you're welcome here, but I'm kind of surprised. A lot of us have been just against Trump, right? And against things. And it's like, oh, I will vote for the other guy because I'm against the giant orange Cheeto. However, now we can be for something. So instead of being like against Trump, we're being for Kamala and for freedom and for fun. Like, she's just fun, and for eloquence and just everything. I mean, I have a major crush on her and love her. So that is affecting our energy, right? I have seen so many people shift, like friends getting haircuts, friends like taking care of themselves a little bit better. I've been sleeping better. It's just this shift toward a positive energy in the zeitgeist, and that's going to affect our energy management as well. And we'll get in more into that here in a minute. Before we do, I also want to talk about overwhelm and burnout. So overwhelm is one of those emotions and feelings of burnout. And as you know, I'm writing a book on burnout called Breaking Up with Burnout. And I'm going to talk a little bit in this episode about how burnout is something that people with neurodiverse challenges, issues, whatever you want to say, those who are neurodivergent deal with. We're more susceptible to it. So too are the highly sensitive people around us. So if you are a highly sensitive person, an empath, true witchy woman, witchy human being, you're probably going to be more susceptible to burnout, because I figured out that we have like 6 different types of burnout that we can be susceptible to. And one of those is energetic. Here we are with the energy again, right? So this episode is about boundaries. And so when we talk about boundaries, I really want to highlight a book I read recently. I'm going to grab it off of my shelf here. And I do keep it right here on my desk because it is that good. And it is Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that it is backwards, but that's okay. Anyways, it is by Nedra Glover Tawwab, and it is a guide to reclaiming yourself. I highly recommend this book. If you're watching on video, you can see I have all kinds of little tabs in it. I have notes in it. It's wonderful. So this is a beautiful guide on boundaries. One other thing about boundaries that we need to keep in mind is that these are boundaries for us, for ourselves, our behavior. Boundaries really aren't about what other people are doing to us. It's how we respond. There was a pop star, a rock star, somebody recently who, and I cannot remember who it was. It was a dude, because of course it was. Anyway, he was like, oh, I don't let my girlfriend do these things because that's just a boundary for me. Well, no. Your boundaries are what you set in place for you, not the restrictions you put on others. So that said, the way that we differentiate is if you have somebody that's doing something to you, like getting in your face about something that they don't need to be getting in your face about, your boundary for you doesn't change their behavior. It does change how you relate to them. So maybe your boundary is like, look, I cannot have you in my life if you're going to continue poking at this one subject. I just can't do it. And for me, I've got to take care of myself, so I'm going to go. It's not limiting their behaviors. So boundaries are what we put in place to help us manage burnout, manage energetic or emotional overwhelm. It's, stepping away if you've had a loss in your family or someone has passed away, like stepping away from that whole thing. I remember many years ago, it was actually when Mike and I first got together. My dad had this very involved surgery. Kind of a lot of the stuff was falling on my shoulders because I was already an adult. My brother was away in the military. My mom was trying to keep it together for herself and my dad. And so a lot of stuff was falling on my shoulders. And there was one day that Mike was like, meet me at this place. I'm taking you to lunch. You got to get away from it all. And just getting away was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. So it didn't change anything around me and the people around me, but it did change my energy in that day. It was stepping aside and creating a boundary for myself just for a couple hours so I could recharge. Right. So we've got different types of boundaries. They can be physical, emotional, time boundaries, that sort of thing. So especially in a business context, one of the boundaries I have in place for myself is after a certain period of time during the day, I'm not going to respond back to messages. And that will vary. There's some days that I might be responding to messages till 6:30, just because I'm having a long day. There are other days, like on a Friday, am I right? That I am not going to be messaging you back after 4 p.m. I'm just not. I am going to be getting ready for my weekend and settling into a more relaxed schedule. And that's just how it is. So when you think about all the different kinds of boundaries you can have, it can be something very tangible like your time. But it can also be things like, hey, I'm not going to be pushing myself 7 days a week at the gym. That would be a physical boundary. Physical boundary is also who you let in your house, quite honestly. So making sure you set these boundaries is so important. But what's more important is honoring them. And so we honor our boundaries by sticking with them, but also communicating with people. So it would not be fair to my clients or myself if I did not let them know the hours in which I am available during the day. So whenever someone signs up with me, comes on board as a client, I let them know the ways that are appropriate to communicate with me and that I'll communicate with them on those ways or via those ways. But also I let them know, hey, I'm available from 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, Central Time to 4:30 or 5 most days. I may choose to message you outside of those hours, but please don't expect that. That's not an everyday thing. So setting those boundaries, honoring them, so I have to stick with them, but also communicating them are super important. This goes for anything inside your business or outside of it. You put boundaries in place for, some alone time from your kids. Maybe it's this is where it kind of gets fuzzy, right? So they need to go play for 20 minutes by themselves while you step away and you have just staring off into space time. Putting your phone down and just zoning out. When you're a parent of a small kid, obviously you can shift behavior to kind of create that boundary because it's helping teach them. But, overall, we don't want to think about boundaries in terms of what is going on with other people because you can't change people. People change if they want to change. You can't change people, but you can change yourself. You can change what you allow in your space, who you allow in your space. And when that happens, you just can. So a few tips for energy protection and energy management. So let's get a little witchy, shall we? Obviously, to protect your energy, we have these boundaries in place. Another one is self-care, and self-care is not just bubble baths, right? One of my favorite self-care is honestly a nap. Sometimes my brain just needs that hard reset. I will set an alarm for 45 minutes. And even if I don't sleep, I keep my eyes closed the whole time. I might doze off a little bit. It's never a deep enough sleep that I get too groggy during the day. But having that eyes closed, just kind of relaxed time for me is something that I really need because I can get super amped up and get super absorbed in things. So I need to do that. I also have a fitness ring, and it will tell me if I've been sitting for too long, which I probably have now because I just started recording this right after like an hour long client meeting, but it's fine. So that's a nice reminder, right? So self-care is movement. Especially if you have ADHD, like your body wants to move. You don't want to sit in the same spot all day long. Like moving is self-care. Reading is self-care. Listening to a podcast is self-care. Playing with your dog is self-care. Making sure you eat your meals during the day, that you don't forget to eat. And sometimes we have to set an alarm. And it's not that you're going to always have to have an alarm to remind you to do something, but to get into that habit, you might. Time management is also another thing, and that is going to look really different for everyone. And that is why I created energetic containers, because they are containers of time, energy, and space. They are not dependent on the clock. And really, the only time I suggest to my clients that they set up a clock to time anything is if they are so convinced that something is taking forever in a day. And I say it in that voice because it's that attitude. Like there's a part of me that is a little like 15-year-old Valley girl that's like, oh my God, it just takes forever to do that. And really it doesn't. I'm going to tell you a story. I actually sat down and I timed myself one day because I had these tasks that I had to do. I had to do one particular task for 2 different clients each week. And I dreaded it. And I put it off. And I put it off and I put it off until I could not possibly put it off any longer. And I would put it off every week. And I was like, oh, it just takes so long. No, it doesn't. I actually timed myself. It took me 25 minutes to get both of them taken care of. What it was is it was the energy and the vibe around them that I didn't like. So I kept putting it off. And in my head, I told myself it took a long time. Like it took an hour and a half, 2 hours to do it. It really didn't. In reality, it took less than half an hour to take care of both of them together. So that is the only time that I really am like, you know what? Time it out. Obviously, if you're working by the hour, you're going to have some sort of time tracking, and that's fine. But otherwise, look at the energy. Don't look at the time. Look at the energy. Look how you feel about these things. So what I did is then I just turned these tasks into something like really fun. So I turned them into something that I was doing with like a fun playlist or a good podcast on, that sort of thing, and just kind of like made kind of a game out of it for me. So another one is delegation. If you are able to delegate anything in your life, do it. Maybe that's hiring a housekeeper. Maybe that's ordering Factor or HelloFresh and taking that off of your mind. I've lately been ordering my groceries from HEB and picking it up. I am delegating grocery shopping to an employee at HEB because going to the store, doing the grocery shopping, loading the car, coming home and unloading the groceries takes up so much energy and time on my part that it just, unless I'm just really in the mood to like browse the aisles, it's too much. So what can you delegate? It doesn't cost me anything extra to have them put my groceries together and then put it in the car at all. And then how is your environment supporting you? Right? So what does your environment look like? What does it feel like? For me, I thrive in a lot of color and a lot of different things to look at. I will swivel my chair around and kind of stare at a piece of artwork on my wall. Everything has meaning for me in my space. And so I create this really great environment where everything I do feels sacred. It feels really important. Like, I have to show you this. So if you're on YouTube, I'll post this on Instagram too. I have this beautiful candle. It looks a little blue in the camera, but it is in fact beautiful purple. Oh, it smells so good. And I just lit this yesterday here on my desk. I love having a beautiful candle right next to me. Far enough away, I don't hit it. But it just kind of like brings that fire element into my space and brings just kind of a sacred nature to it. Plus, fire is a good divine masculine energy, which we really need for work. Okay, so as we look at, how we're going to balance work and life, if you've been around me for any period of time, you know that I don't really like the term work-life balance. Instead, I like work-life alignment, because if we're seeking balance all the time, that can get really heavy. However, if we can seek alignment, this is a beautiful thing. I appreciate being able to do all of the things in my life with mindfulness. And so if I'm approaching my work, my environment, my boundaries, even my grocery shopping with being mindful, this is an alignment of work and life. Because if you own your own business, sometimes you're going to be working way more than you're going to be living. If you're on vacation, you're living way more than you're working, hopefully. If, like when I was supporting my parents way back when my dad was in the hospital, he was in ICU for a while. I was lifing a whole lot more than I was working. It made it kind of interesting because I was like at the hospital, working at the hospital, in my free time. So balance it's pretty much a myth. However, having that work-life alignment will shift everything for you. Another thing to do, of course, is prioritizing your mental health. So making sure you have the resources that you need to ensure that you are mentally healthy. If you are able to go to therapy, I highly recommend it. It is beautiful. It is one of the best investments in my self-care and my overall wellness that I have ever made. Huge advocate for therapy. We love therapy in this house. If you are able to get to a gym or get outside, being in nature has really been scientifically proven to benefit our mental health. So whatever it is that makes you feel good about who you are and what you're doing and how you're doing it in the world, really prioritize that. Make sure there's some containers for that in your weekly schedule. And that is all I have for you today. I hope you have found this inspiring. I hope you have found this intriguing. As we're getting closer to the date, I am super excited to be opening the doors to Lunar Business Lab, the Lunar Business Lab, in September. And if you join here in August, you actually get a free 30-minute strategy call with me just in the beginning, because we're really going to kick things off in September. So if you're interested in learning more and joining, hop over to my website, meganwinkler.com, or shoot me an email, hello@meganwinkler.com, or find me on Instagram at the Good Business Witch. And I would love to welcome you into this beautiful monthly membership specifically for people who want to work with the moon in their careers, whether you own a business or not, or just in your life. Come hang out. It's going to be absolutely magical. You're going to love it. For now, have a great rest of your week. Have a marvelous weekend if you're listening to this on Friday. And I do hope that you are able to, in every way, stay magical. Chat soon.